Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 681. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
I'm George Conger. Today's August 17th, 2021.
All right, welcome to another program, and I'm here to help you out. If you don't know, your role as a viewer, it's to like the program, to subscribe to the program, comment to the program, share the program, and I can't think of any. Oh, if you want to listen to the podcast, do the podcast to the program. It's real simple to be a listener and viewer of Anglican Unscripted, and we appreciate you helping us out because Facebook and YouTube, they don't know if we're good or not. The only way they know if we're a good program is if you liked it. Okay? It's your job. George, how's your week going?
It's actually been pretty great from a church perspective. Our church, even though we're suffering short-term from COVID, has been doing pretty well these past few years, and we've wanted to get a new organ for a long, long time because the old one sort of wheezes and whatnot, and we were costed out to about $30,000-$40,000. Well, I really didn't want to start an organ campaign in the middle of a pandemic, so we started it off just last week, and I'm already halfway there.
Oh, really?
Not
That's
just
amazing.
with pledges, but with checks coming in. So
Nice.
People have been waiting. Maybe I've been wrong in thinking that people have not wanted to be distracted by things like organ campaigns. And then a second miracle occurred, and I'll call them miracles. I did a catechesis at the Good Shepherd training with my wife, and we need about $5,000 to purchase all the materials and get the things set up so that we can start an Advent. Well, I really didn't want to start an organ campaign fund and a catechesis campaign fund and the pledge season all simultaneously. Well, I asked around among clergy in the diocese, does anybody have the materials? Here or there, if you got a spare set of something. And a priest wrote saying the woman who ran her program's going off to seminary, and we will give you everything we have. So now I've got to $5,000 plus worth of educational materials and items. All answered prayer.
Yeah.
I mean, God is just working. If God wants to kill off the Episcopal Church, it's a great job elsewhere, but in Central Florida, he's having a hard time killing it because it keeps growing and prospering.
No, and I think that's what we're seeing with COVID is the churches that were strong and healthy going into COVID have really come out the other end pretty good. Our church is a great example. The budget's good. We don't have any shortfall in income. We run a live stream. In fact, now our pastor says, hey, I want a Spanish edition of our live stream to reach more people. And now we have a Spanish stream that's simulcast at the same time as our English stream. Okay. And he's got the money to do it. And it's a new program offered by Church of the Apostles in Bridgeport, Connecticut. COVID has drawn out the strong churches, and like wheat and chaff, the smaller churches aren't surviving, in my opinion.
And maybe COVID has caused COVID has caused so many changes, but one of the things is to dive deeper into the people we have. I don't know if that makes
it does
clear,
yeah.
But I mean, maybe I've got 600 people on the books, and in the season that means 275, 300 on a Sunday. Right now it's 150 with COVID and everything. But I've been needing people to help with audiovisual. And of course, you've got the odd teenager who's an odd teenager,
yes.
And
walks around with his satchel, always has the right cord.
And well, I wrote to everybody in the start of the fall saying, do you have a skill? Is there something? Here's what we need at the church. And there's one guy who's a Christmas and Easter guy. He's a nice guy, but he is what he is. Turns out that he's a professional cinematographer. He was a cameraman on Star Wars, on Fast and Furious. And he came in and he said, I'd love to set up your audiovisual so that you have a perfect thing, because that's really something I love and enjoy. And so now my audiovisual tech is not a pimply geek. I love pimply geeks. They come to church every Sunday. But here's a guy in his 60s who spent his life in Hollywood, who's moved to Hooterville, Florida.
Lecanto, where the force is with him. That's kind of cool.
I mean, what is God planning that we have a real cinematographer? Maybe the sermons will start out with this scroll of far ago and long away.
I don't want to hum the tune. I don't want a copyright violation, but that's really awesome. So you'll be up and at 'em with the audiovisual, thanks to a history of Star Wars. I mean, if Steven Spielberg came up for the church one day, that would be a little cooler.
Well, he did give us a list of recommended equipment, and it costed out to about $75,000.
Yeah, it's
new. And I said, well, if you could cut that down to like 5% of that, we could run about $3,000 or $4,000. And he did, and it's all used equipment that he's gotten from buddies and stuff. Good. And it's not the fastest, latest stuff, but
there's no light item for Industrial Light and Magic, to have CGI effects when George walks in. Okay, cool. All right, so let's go to and we've been doing this 5 weeks in a row. It's working. It gets harder some weeks to find a good story, but we have another good story. Another diocese in Angola, George.
Yes, a fourth diocese has been inaugurated in Angola. The name in English is the Diocese of Central and Southern Angola. It's based in Lubango, which is in the southwestern side of the diocese. And this is just an extraordinary. It's the same exact comments I would have over the last 3 new dioceses we've announced. Mm-hmm. But you cannot cage the Holy Spirit. You cannot put it into an institutional box. The smart people would say, church building, suburban gated communities. That's where you got to go. Absolutely. Put your money here. Mm-hmm. Don't put it in the war-torn southern part of Uganda where SWAPO and the South African Army were engaged with each other for 20 plus years in guerrilla warfare. This was a scene of open war between South Africa and the Angolans and the Cubans and the Southwest African or Namibian rebels. There's now an Anglican diocese there. God be praised.
Absolutely.
This was former communist country where the church is growing.
Normally we follow that up with a Church of England story. We don't really have one this week, do we?
No, I mean...
Wait,
what more can one say?
I know. It's the middle of August, and in Christian journalism, the middle of August is the dry spell. This is where we go into our drought, and we start getting garden stories. Oh, we have a new garden that's being planted in our diocesan house. Would you like to cover that? And so it's hard to look for stories, and that's why we're stuck with international stories like Afghanistan.
We have a semi Church of England story.
Okay, you throw it up there. What do you got?
Okay, well, this is more along the People magazine line than Anglican Unscripted line. But the second child, the little girl of Prince Harry and Meghan, is not going to be baptized in the Church of England. They're going to do it in America in an Episcopal church in Los Angeles.
Will Michael Curry fly out for that, do you think?
Well, here's the thing. They're big. I don't think they're particularly religious, but the child has to be within the communion of the Church of England if it wants to be within the line of succession. Mm-hmm. And that if they're baptizing it in the Episcopal Church, then they preserve that. So All Saints Pasadena, Christchurch, Beverly Hills, wherever these people are living right now, they're going to have a little media event. But probably they'll want to keep it private, but the paparazzi are going to have a field day in Southern California.
Meghan Markle does not want to keep it private. So let's be honest about that.
Well, let me be fair. Let me be fair. That's what they're saying today.
Okay.
They may just be leveraging this to get the royal family to cough up some money or cough up something so that they'll keep it in house over at St. George's Chapel in Windsor. where they were married.
This raises the question, after what happened at the marriage, will there be a practice baptism?
I don't know.
I'm just...
will Michael Curry lift this up as being an example of true love?
True love. So good. We had our Church of England story, as strange as this. Okay, George, obviously the biggest story this week is not Cuba 3 weeks ago. It's not Haiti last week. It's Afghanistan this week. And we're seeing the continued strife of a country that's been run to ruins by militant Islam for centuries. The tribalism in the country cannot be overcome by the brutal force of the Soviet Union. It cannot be overcome by the kind force of America and our allies. It's just a country where, because of its terrain, its tribalism, and its people, and its horrible neighbors, surrounding countries, it just lives in this devastation, George.
Michael Curry, presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, released a prayer for Afghanistan on the occasion of the fall of Kabul yesterday. And I have to say, this is the first thing we've ever published on Anglican Inc. that has received universal praise from the Episcopal readers as well as the ACNA readers. There's nobody who's come out and made fun or said, what a hypocrite, the usual stuff that we see when people on different denominations take a swipe at their leader. And that's reflected in, I think, the American body politic. Conservatives, liberals, Republicans, Democrats, everybody sees this, except for President Biden, perhaps, as a national shame and tragedy.
I would say international. This is beyond our comprehension of, we can't fix this. Why can't we, after decades and decades, convince the populace of Afghanistan to fight for themselves?
Well, Kevin, you and I are, I don't want to out us, if you will, but neither of us were really that keen to be there in the first place.
No, I opposed it.
Because there was a strain of what they would call neoconservatism under George Bush, that we can remake Afghanistan into our own image and turn it into a little New England town hall democracy. And both you and I have all long been of the opinion, culture counts, religion counts, and you're not going to change the Afghanis in one generation.
Well, I think there was always the hope. In the 1970s, early 1970s, Afghanistan, Kabul were very westernized. And I think there was the hope of George Bush that, hey, we can return it to them. They were there once. We can take and get rid of all the bad people, and they will love their country so much again that they will return to the Western thought and theology, where they can wear skirts and walk around in jeans and not have to wear scarves. We can do that for Afghanistan. And guess what? We can't.
Well, we could do that for the 1% who live in Kabul who have education. But for the 99%, and I'm using exaggerated numbers, for the 99% in the villages who can't read or write, the women who have 8 and 10 children, who, as you say, live in a patriarchal, tribal society, this was offensive. And, I don't want to dissect all the failures, but, in the last few years, the United States spent millions of dollars setting up a gender studies department at the University of Kabul. The U.S. Embassy in Afghanistan was promoting Pride Month, Gay Pride Month, in July. And what sort of cultural sensitivity, cluelessness, is being exhibited here? And so I'm not a military strategist, but for these people who almost seem to be military tourists, these neoconservative activists in both the Republican and Democratic Party, not the military. The military had to carry out these people's orders. just wanting to use the army at the drop of a hat to be social workers and implement change by at the point of a gun, our guns. It was just such a terrible mistake. Well, and now we're what Michael Curry is going, and now we're going to see martyrdom of the country's few Christian converts. We're going to see women sold off, placed into forced marriages, back under the chador, the burqa, covered from head to toe.
No, women and children have just become property again. I mean, that part of the Sharia mindset. But since 1776, America's always pondered and wondered how far should we get involved in foreign wars, in foreign policy, and what influence. George and I have U.S. Constitution privilege. Okay, we are privileged to be under the Constitution, which our army and leaders, for the most part, try to protect. And so we know what the value of liberty is and the value of freedom is. And I do wish that value upon all the nations around the world. And and this is why there's always that discussion at the leadership level. Well, do we get involved in this? Are we going to send troops over here? What are we going to do? And do we form a coalition? And because we know the value of freedom. That's why we have these discussions, George.
For our foreign viewers, and for those educated in America's school system, there are two worldviews of foreign policy. I'm sure there are many, many more, but two dominant ones. One is the Wilsonian worldview, named for Woodrow Wilson, president at the end of the First World War, where we are engaged in moral crusades and we're going to fight for ideals and commit our troops for those purposes. Then there's the Jacksonian, Andrew Jackson worldview, which is let's keep as far away from foreign entanglements as we can because human nature, in the end of the day, is corrupt. Both of these have religious motives coming out of American Protestantism. And I think I'll say for myself, and I think, Kevin, you would say so too, we're on the Jackson side, that human nature is corrupt, and trying to perfect the Afghan people is a fool's errand. Helping them individually, helping them, discreetly, that's one thing. Having, in this, the American, for our foreign viewers, the American body politic is so on the same side on this issue against the president and the administration. You even had Leon Panetta, former head of the CIA under Barack Obama, former defense secretary under Barack Obama, saying this is the worst foreign policy failure since the Bay of Pigs and John F. Kennedy. It's that bad.
Yeah.
And it's being shoved off on the Afghan army, on Donald Trump. Yeah, you can think of every excuse you want. But at the end of the day, it didn't have to end this way.
Nobody has clean hands in this. Everybody has bloody hands. Every leader does. I mean, Obama had made a deal to release the current head of the Taliban back in 2014. I mean, the guy sitting in the castle in Kabul was released from Guantanamo Bay by President Obama. His hands are in this too. There's nobody here who can say with a clear conscience, I got nothing to do with this. You do. And the part of the thing is kind of the American pride that we can overcome this tribalism. We can overcome what happens in the Middle East and in these countries where, for centuries, if not more, this mindset has taken place. And they look at the West and the freedom that we have here as something not to be desired. They find it distasteful.
Actually, Kevin, the Taliban is in favor of the mask mandates.
Yes.
Except just for women coming out of the White House.
So, this is indeed something we need to put into prayer. And there's going to be martyrdom here. There are many ministries and house churches underground. If you go to Google and type churches in Kabul or churches in Afghanistan, nothing comes up. A couple ministries will come up, and some international UNICEF. But every Christian in Afghanistan is underground. Please stay there. You know.
Yeah, the only official Christian presence has been a Catholic church on the grounds of the Italian embassy.
Right.
And there's some nuns there who run a hospital of some sort. Everything else, and when up until Friday, there was an Episcopal and an ACNA presence in Kabul with chaplains in the military chaplaincies. So that if you want, the Archbishop responsible for Afghanistan is either
Foley Beach,
or Michael Curry, because it's impossible for an indigenous Christian church to operate freely, because they would be killed, because they would be considered apostates for Islam. Now, over 20 years of Western presence, with missionaries from South Korea, the United States, people with double jobs as NGO workers or contract employees, also meeting and proselytizing, there have been a movement into Christianity. One of the movements that is one of the most fertile pieces has been among the Shia minority in Afghanistan. The Taliban are Sunni, and they hate the Shia just as much as they hate Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And the Shia have been I don't want to say many because I don't know the numbers, but it is reported to us that Shia have been particularly welcoming of the Christian worldview, people coming to Christ through dreams, seeking out Americans and asking about Christianity because of a dream they've had. Those people are on death lists, we're told, by foreign missionaries who are still in Kabul right now. And there was I saw one tweet, and again, friends, I cannot verify this, a SEAL, I think it was a SEAL or a Special Forces operator, had a group photo with himself, another American, and a team of Afghan Special Forces who all lived in Kandahar. Well, he tweeted that here we are with our team in February. I just learned that every one of my colleagues was pulled from his house in Kandahar and shot in the street for having served in the Afghan army against the Taliban.
And people wonder why the army fell so fast, the Afghan army. It's because you flee and live, you stay, fight, and die, because the Taliban have a no capture policy. You know, you are worth a bullet. You're not worth handcuffs. And
the other reason I think that we're hearing reports of units and isolated places, people fighting to death for that exact reason, or people just taken off when the first shot is fired. And one of the things that Americans who have not been following this closely, who are not interested in military affairs, there's not been an American combat casualty for 18 months. And in December, when Donald Trump left office, there were 2,500 American troops in Afghanistan. Since 2014, we've not had
more than that. 2,500.
Yeah, that's all.
Okay.
And in 2014, we withdrew combat operations on the ground.
Right.
And since 2014, 50,000 Afghan soldiers in the Afghan army have died.
Mm-hmm.
How the operations have been fought, because every year there's a Taliban offensive, is the army engages on the ground and the U.S. Air Force pounds them from above. And what we have provided is air support and intelligence support and the occasional special forces operations. And the thing was, if that had been kept in place, the Taliban would never have been able to be victorious. But once the Afghan army realized they have no air cover and they have no intelligence, the Americans have pulled out. This is what we did to the South Vietnamese in 1975. We told them one day, because the South Vietnamese, they had an air force, but basically the air power in South Vietnam was American.
Mm-hmm.
And the North Vietnamese couldn't do a thing about it, and it was a stalemate. But then the Democratic-led Senate, including Joe Biden, voted to cut off all funding for operations in South Vietnam. And when the air cover was pulled, the North Vietnamese could roll in, because our military strategy is based on the coordination of arms, ground forces, and air power. That's how we trained the Afghan army. And all of a sudden, the Afghan army, who's trained to call in for air support when they're in a particularly tight spot, that's not there anymore.
No.
Of course they're going to melt away.
Now, here's Kevin's military strategy. Going to help you out here for those high-ranking officials who watch Anglican Unscripted. Right now, all the Taliban leaders are in a certain palace in Kabul. We have drones throughout the region. You put a little missile. I'd go two. You don't want a little follow-up. You put the drone in the air. You wait for a press conference outside the palace with the new leaders of the Taliban. You flick your little control switch and you hit the red button that says launch. Boom! You've set the Taliban back 6 months. That's just Kevin's strategy. You know where the enemy is, but we no longer consider them the enemy. There has been discussions that we could offer the Taliban foreign aid if they would stop killing the Afghan army. Good job, guys.
How would we know if they're killing them or not? Because we're not there. But the international repercussions, you can hear the grand strategic stuff on TV, but I'll talk about the little stuff that I'm aware of through our networks. In Nigeria, the Muslim Council of Northern Nigeria, there's a bishop, a Catholic bishop, Bishop Soko, whatever, who's a media personality, and he has written to the U.S. Congress about religious rights violations by Muslims against, the Fulani and the Boko Haram, to U.S. Congress, asking, live up to your stated purposes to help foster religious freedom. And the Muslim Council of Northern Nigeria has published an open letter to the Catholic bishop, the Bishop of Sokoto, saying, see what American promises are worth. And, you can't trust the Americans. And basically, it's a nice way of saying, we're going to have you killed if you keep talking.
Yep.
So we're going to see, and this is going to embolden Boko Haram. It's going to embolden the ISIS forces in Mozambique, in the Congo, in Pakistan, and in Sudan, who are at war with Christians for being Christians. This is a propaganda victory of immense value that will lead to Christians on ground in Africa and in Asia being killed. Now, so am I saying Joe Biden's at fault? No, I'm not, but he didn't kill anybody. But I think this could have been done so much more professionally.
Well, as this Afghan foreign policy debacle, there's one country watching right now looking to their good friend, the U.S., and that's Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is saying, we're screwed. If they aren't going to stay and fight for Afghanistan, if, some of the mysterious stuff they've done in the last 20, 30, 40 years in the Middle East, how can we know that the U.S., NATO, or anybody's going to be there for us when China comes to our shores of Hong Kong? So just one of those things, George. This whole thing is not just Afghanistan. It's foreign policy worldwide. Strange story, and you were telling me this in the pre-show. A family from Sweden decided a couple weeks ago, this is a great opportunity to move to Afghanistan. I think we should tell our viewers a little about this.
Have you ever heard of the Darwin Awards, Kevin,
Yes,
for the stupidest thing?
We used to give those out.
Well, I would nominate in the Darwin Awards this Swedish family, a family of 5, husband and wife and 3 children. Sweden hasn't had a diplomatic presence in Afghanistan for a while, or
2004.
years. And in 2004, they said, Swedes, do not go to Afghanistan. We can't do anything there. We can't help you. So this family from Sweden decides to tour Afghanistan, and they arrive in July. of 2021, and they wanted to fly out on August 8th. They didn't have the return tickets confirmed. And, stuff started to happen at the first week of August. And so now this woman is on social media demanding Sweden send in a military aircraft to pick them up from Hamid Karzai International Airport because their flight plans were canceled and the airline canceled their flights and everything. Friends, if you were thinking about vacationing in Kabul, not this year. Wait. How can you be so stupid, Kevin? I mean, just seriously, how can you be so stupid?
Oh no! If you look at the history of some of my stupider things back in my 20s, this would be in the list. Yeah, but you're right. I mean,
maybe so. I mean,
international.
When my daughter was,
yeah, I think.
Oh, when my daughter was in college at Emory in Atlanta, she and her friends would come down to St. Augustine for hurricane parties. There's a hurricane approaching the Florida coast. Oh, let's go see it. It'll be fun and exciting. And, so they were the only ones coming this way while the highway to Atlanta and out of Florida is packed. They want to... maybe I shouldn't be too hard on the Swedes. But the Swedish...
I don't know.
Man, oh man.
Yeah. Okay, so...
Probably got good, cheap hotel rates. They probably got good hotel rates.
Probably, yeah. The only flight over. They probably had their first class...
Cheap flight going in. I mean, Afghan Airways, I'm sure, had cheap one-way tickets to Kabul. I mean...
Okay. Let's move on to our last news story of the day. We talked earlier about a lot of churches had success in COVID. They're financially strong. They're maintained or are returning to a healthy population of church. Their ministries are going strong, and they're returning to post-COVID normal. And we want to talk a little bit about Kappa's in the news, and Gafcon is going to be in the news, about those who are struggling now, either because of COVID or poor management or just a culture of what do we do now-ism. And let's talk a little bit about Gafcon, because they issued their financial numbers in July, and it's time to read through those, George.
July 22nd, Gafcon submitted its fiscal 2020 financial statements to the Charity Commission in the UK. Mm-hmm. And they were published July 22nd. No, did I? Well, they were published by the Charity Commission on July 22nd, and they were as of September 30th, 2020. Gafcon its budget has gone from a good-sized American diocese to a good-sized American parish. My parochial budget is about the size of Gafcon's right now. Yeah. Fundraising has they've spent £75,000 fundraising, and their fundraising appeals have just died. They list three sources of income. They list it from organizations, they list it from grants, and list it from individuals. And I assume the fundraising, that money that they're spending, is to get money from individuals. I think they're underwater with that. I
would say that would be in the red, for sure. And I remember when we were forming AnglicanTV years ago, we were contacted by these third parties. Hey, we will be your fundraising arm. You tell us how much money you want, and we'll tell you how much that's going to cost. Well, if I wanted to raise $100,000, that's $60,000. What? You're going to charge me $60,000 to raise $100,000? That doesn't. No, my board of directors will never approve that. What are you talking about? I mean, if you were to charge me $10, I could maybe talk them into getting the $100,000. So, I don't really believe in paying a third party for fundraising, George. That's really strange to me, and especially now that you're collecting in the red from what we can see on paper. You may want to correct us elsewise.
I think there's a conceptual problem. The founding documents, the mission, the purpose, the spirit of Gafcon is alive, it's well, it's strong. Mm-hmm. The Jerusalem Declaration has stood the test of time. Its short-term, its strategic vision is working. It's tactical, meaning short, short-term work is pretty bad.
The cornerstone
of what I'm thinking.
Well, let's reanalyze. The cornerstone of Gafcon is solid. The structure they put together, the doctrine they put together, the first three conferences are a solid start for a maturing ministry. However, George, the
ongoing operations leave much to be desired.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of what I'm thinking about. Kappa, Council of Anglican Provinces of Africa, met this past week at All Souls Cathedral in Cairo. Mm-hmm. Archbishop Sami Faza was the Faza. I don't
it's know. All right. Sorry. No, it's Tuesday.
Was the host, and Archbishop Munir Nice was one of the primary speakers. And you looked at the conference agenda, and it was what Kevin and I joke is most of it was the mosquito net stuff. Social advocacy, how to do this, how to do that. Simultaneously, they were running a new bishops training program at the cathedral for new African bishops. The one item that caught my eye that I thought was a really good idea was how do we ensure smooth transitions between bishops? Africa has a problem of leaders not wanting to leave until the troops are at the door about to shoot you.
Yeah.
And some bishops have incorporated that mindset into their work. So they are addressing some important issues. Same time, we have Trinity Wall Street and the Anglican Church of Canada holding these listening groups where they bring African bishops together with Canadian and American bishops, flying them first class to UK and other venues, wining and dining them and talking about relative truth. Well, what may be true for you in Tanzania isn't true for us in Toronto. God's speaking in a different voice in two different places.
And we have the money to back that statement up.
Yeah. And then Gafcon offers its bishops training programs, independent of their primates meetings. So if let's take a periphery. If you're from West Africa, if you're from Central Africa, if you're from Tanzania, if you're from the Sudan, South Sudan, so on and so forth, Malawi, Rwanda, not Rwanda, but places like that. And you've got a choice of these conferences that essentially are doing the same agenda. Why would you go to Gafcon? I mean, because you're not going to get the world-class dining that you get when the Trinity Wall Street pays for it. You're not going to have the African solidarity boost that you go do for Kappa, because in other words, what is Gafcon offering in the short term that is not already being offered by Lambeth Palace, by Trinity Wall Street, by Kappa, by the mission societies? Now, there are some, the Ugandans will basically always be faithful, the Nigerians will be Nigerians. But Gafcon's lost, as George Bush had the phrase, the big mo, momentum. Gafcon had momentum. Its structures were set up almost to be a parallel Anglican communion office. And with no money flowing into its coffers, it's impossible to do that.
Money is, I don't want them to fly bishops around first class. Of course, that's not what we're talking about. But we are talking about, fulfilling the missions you talked about from the last two Gafcon meetings. There's a women's initiative that was supposed to happen under
Gloria Kwashi, was it?
Yeah, with Gloria Kwashi. That I've seen nothing come out of that. I've seen these programs. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do, and I wait to make the announcement to my audience that this is what Gafcon's doing, and I'm not getting a lot of news to report. And now I look at your financials and I see, ouch. And I don't think you can just blame Gafcon. I don't think you can just blame COVID for this, George. I think this is a bigger structural problem than COVID.
Yeah, picking apart the financials, and we'll have a detailed article when I have time. I'm sorry to say. on these statements, but they mention they have a subscriber list of emails that they send out there, sort of good words to. I was really appalled by how small that subscriber list is. I mean, it's 30-40% of our subscriber list. Now, and I remember when the Anglican Communion Network, the forerunner to the ACNA, was forming, they had a subscriber list of 15,000.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And communications are everything in this modern age. And building the brand, building the market, keeping the troops riled up, keeping the focus where you want it to be. And they've not succeeded in reaching out to the second, third, fourth, fifth tier and lay people of the Anglican world. They may do a great job with the primates, but an African primate is not going to move unless his bishops are with them. And they've not done the work necessary, I believe, to ensure the structural stability and the ability to push back against Lambeth Palace and the Anglican Communion Office and so on and so forth.
And we've discussed this before. One of the biggest problems structurally of Gafcon is it's not into the bylaws of the provinces that support it. You know, we don't have the Congo right into their constitution. We are a member and supporting member of Gafcon. That's more done at the primate level. And so that's always been a structural issue within Gafcon, is the support changes from primate to primate to primate. And that will always be a difficulty of Gafcon until they can get to the point where they can convince provinces, we need to be equal partners, and we need to be part of your bylaws and constitution. We need to have that level of partnership, and that's a difficulty.
And it could be as simple as affirming the Jerusalem Declaration.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to say that we're forever tied to the Gafcon Secretariat, wherever that may be. One of the things I'm picking up, and this is my impression, so I'm not reporting this, I'm reporting as fact, I'm reporting it as news, is that Sydney has bailed out the active leadership of Gafcon when Peter Jensen stepped aside, but it's still calling the shots.
I've heard that
and
too.
Ben Kwashi's in Nigeria, the new secretary. Mm-hmm. The administrative offices are in southern England, but the power behind the throne still lies in Sydney. But the Sydney archbishops, Glenn Davies, really that was not his thing. Kanishka Raphael, the new archbishop, I don't know where he stands on these things in detail. He's very, very new. So and the chairman is in suburban Atlanta, Foley Beach. So that communications are imperative.
But I don't think this is Foley Beach's problem. Or fault. I don't think this is any primate's fault. I think this is an operations level fault. Operations is you get the assignment, you fulfill the assignment.
And one of the things that struck me in particular, and I don't know how to process this. Gafcon 1 in Jerusalem gave birth essentially to the ACNA.
Mm-hmm.
It blessed its focus, and the ACNA is what it is today, a very successful province of the Anglican Communion, mm-hmm. though not recognized as such by the Anglican Consultative Council.
Who?
In looking up the Gafcon finances, I came across Gafcon UK first, and its budget was £12,000.
I paid more for my car than that.
And where I'm coming with this is that with £12,000, you're not going to convert England.
No.
I don't know how to say more than that. I just was so disappointed
we'll
that
put
it hasn't moved the way it should.
Let's put this in context. The early success of Gafcon was having a Catherine Jefferts Schori. We're planning for something new in North America. We're going to form the Anglican Church in North America. And wow, we have something that we can point to the world and say, we don't want to be that. They don't have that type of thing with Justin Welby. Justin Welby is a political church squish. He's not, taking out and deposing people left and right. There's no 770 people that can say, I was deposed by Justin Welby. And without that, 12,000 pounds is not going to take down the Church of England, George.
And in addition to having a Catherine Jefferts Schori, you had a Peter Akinola. I just happen to have this in my bag. I got,
who blinks first?
I got this book in the mail, Peter Akinola, Who Blinks First. Uh-huh. It's a fairly long book. I haven't even cracked it yet, open yet. And Peter Akinola was quite the poor fellow. I mean, he really was a first-class strategist, polemicist. He did a great job doing in the start. And I don't mean to compare apples to oranges, but there isn't a Peter Akinola from Africa right now leading the charge that people in the West can get behind who might give money.
Well, in my mind's eye, I think Africa largely didn't want to be in the leadership role of Gafcon and kind of passed it on to Foley and passed it on to North America because we have so many bigger things to fight in the bush in our provinces in dealing with militant Islam and dealing with the finances of our countries and dealing with the poor leadership in our countries. We don't have time to continue Gafcon because we think Gafcon's in good hands over here with Sydney, England, and Atlanta. I think they just kind of wash their hands of it.
I wonder if Gafcon had a problem I had of I was afraid to ask for money for an organ in COVID. Yeah. And as soon as I laid out the need for it and got people excited, half the money showed up within the week. Maybe there's a fear of stating to the world, folks, the cupboard is bare. We need your help to accomplish these things which we all agree need to be done. But unless you step up, we can't do it. Perhaps it's time that they really need to push and let the world know what their needs are, not just assume that somebody else is going to take care of it for you.
And Gafcon's going to promise not to spend money on a third-party fundraising. I don't know how to work this out, but here, George, right now you and I are the fundraising arm of Gafcon. For our viewers out there, and there's thousands of you out there, many of you are of wealthy means because you help support Anglican TV, and I know that. Right here is the Gafcon website. Right here in the lower part of the lower thirds of the thing it says gafcon.org. Go there. The first thing that pops up when you get to the website is donate. I think that's done by a third party. I don't know. But go in there and click the donate button and please give to Gafcon because we support fully the nature, cornerstone, and ministry of Gafcon. And we do want it to be a healthy system within the U.S. They were there to fight for us 10 years ago, and we want them to be there to fight in 10, 20, 30 years from now. And you can help.
See, let me just give you a scenario. In the Episcopal Church in the United States, there are a good number of people who support the aims of Gafcon, but there's no outreach there. There's no sense that there's a field to be tapped, and this has left the playing field open to groups like the Communion Partners, who really don't do that much. They certainly weren't there for Bill Love to run riot. And Communion Partners has no money because there's nobody that's arisen in the Episcopal Church who can basically hold on to something like Gafcon and say, folks, I'm an Episcopalian and I am a traditional Anglican. And here's the battle plan. Upward and onward we go. That's a single scenario. I don't know how often that can be repeated in Canada and other places.
Oh, yeah. That would be unique. But that brings up another topic. Albany. There's new fresh blood. I'm not going to say fresh. If you're my age, you're not fresh. There's new blood in Albany, George.
Yes, the assisting bishop has been appointed, Michael Smith. And Michael Smith, this is silly. And for those who get worried about my language, I'm sorry. I hope this won't upset you either. If you're too sensitive, turn off viewing now. Come back in about a minute. Michael Smith, who is the former bishop of North Dakota, assistant bishop of Dallas, has been engaged to be the assisting bishop of Albany. And Michael Smith has reached the age in life, flying off of Kevin's new blood comment. He now has a hairstyle where he brushes his hair straight up, so to hide his thinning scalp. And
you can do that? I don't think you could do that.
He does. He uses hair gel and brushes it up, and it's and in some ways I think this is a symbolism of the Episcopal Church of we're hiding our thinning scalp. And so, good for Michael Smith to help the people in Albany, but Albany needs a champion right now who's willing to get into the ditch and fight hard. And a caretaker. And this is not that person. He's not called to be that person. He's called to be the caretaker.
Absolutely.
But I pray that Albany has the right man, because it will be a man in Albany. I'd be surprised if they elected a woman who can pull them out of their nosedive.
Indeed. All right, George, we have gone long today. 51 minutes. I feel so sorry for our audience who, this is why we ask you so early on to like the show. Because by the time you get to 51 minutes, your fingers are numb and you can't think straight. But we appreciate you watching Anglican Unscripted. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
And I'm George Conger, a non-compensated spokesman for the Hair Club for Men.
That's right.
And you have been watching episode 681 of Anglican Unscripted.